Hello, everyone. My name is Devin Rue. I'm a professional fantasy cartographer and illustrator in the tabletop RPG industry, as well as your host for the Quip and Quill podcast.
Hi. My name is Josh. You can find me on the internet on most social media platforms at Joshua M. Simons or on my website, joshuamsimons.com. In short, I'm a guy who is on the internet. A lot of people might know me as the community manager at Demiplane, or a game designer, actual play performer, tabletop games industry professional. But, I like to think that I'm more than just what I do for work and what my hobbies are. I like to think that, I'm just some dude. I've got a cute dog. I've got a house with my fiance. I read books and I like to cook. And, I contain many multitudes.
A Renaissance man, if you would.
Yes. I'm glad to not live in the Renaissance.
No.
And benefit from things like indoor plumbing and air conditioning. but, there's nothing wrong with having many interests and things like that.
What do you read?
I read a little bit of everything. My current kind of philosophy for reading books is I alternate. I'll read one novel, something fictional, and then I'll read a piece of nonfiction, whether that's a biography or I hesitate to say self-help book because I don't know if that's quite what it is, but like professional, advice books, classic, example that I read last year was, how to win friends and influence people. Is that the name of the book?
I think so, yeah.
So things like that. Recently I read a biography on George Washington. Before that, I read a fantasy series that Athena, my fiance, recommended to me. It's a fairly recent one called Fourth Wing and Iron Flame. The author is apparently problematic. I've found this out since I read them, but who isn't problematic in this day and age? We're all.
I'm hoping I'm not.
Last I checked, you're actually good. You're actually good.
I do my best. It's one of the reasons why I absolutely kill things offline in video games.
Right, of course, naturally. Yes. Disclaimer.
Yeah. Before anyone's like, what? No. I play a lot of games where there's combat because I gotta get my aggression out somehow. So I don't express such things on the internet.
Yeah.
Because I am a really right now? I am absolutely obsessed with Enshrouded. It is so I, being old, absolutely loved the original Zelda games.
Okay.
And this kind of reminds me of it, where we get to, well, one, you're highly encouraged to break a lot of pots, so that makes me happy. And you get to glide all over the place, so that's also, I'm like, oh, it's kind of like an updated, I can't say updated Zelda because there is one, but
it's a spiritual successor.
Right. If Valheim and Zelda had a baby, it would be Enshrouded.
Awesome. I've heard good things. I just haven't checked it out myself yet. I've been playing a top-down Command and Conquer style zombie survivor game where you build out your base and train soldiers and shoot zombies as you try to grow your population. Very, very Command and Conquer style gameplay. This is what I've been playing recently. It's called They Are Billions. It's like a decade old at this point or something. Right. And that's been my recent gaming obsession, is a 10-year-old game.
I mean, I still play Skyrim.
Skyrim is good.
Yeah.
Skyrim is good.
Yeah. Yeah, no, my wife plays those games. She loves them, and I often just sit there amazed. See, I love resource management games, but not the combat with them for some reason.
Yeah.
Like I really like Medieval Dynasty for that because that's a resource management game and, kind of make your villagers happy type of thing. But there's like very little combat unless you go out and look for it, and hunt bandits and stuff. So I can't handle the stress of both.
Yeah. There's a element of multitasking, and the science shows that humans aren't great at multitasking.
No.
So it's it can be a stressful thing, but it's a challenge, I guess.
Right. Hey, if you're into it, that's all that matters.
It's true.
Yeah. So I have to ask now, what do you like to cook? I'm a foodie, so.
Okay, so I feel like so I've got like some favorites that are just like classics. They're staples. I do them a lot. My great grandmother's like mac and cheese, oven baked mac and cheese from scratch is a personal favorite to eat, not just to cook.
Right.
But when we've got a little extra room in the budget, I like to like go get some steaks or go get some fish and like find some new like flavor combo with like seasoning or something like that to I like just like experimenting with flavors. It's I don't think so much it's about like the art of cooking so much as it's a chance to do something that isn't work related at the end of the day. It's like an artistry that doesn't require hours and hours and hours of practice to be able to get the lines right, because I took art like lessons when I was younger, but I've never quite had the discipline to keep with it over the years. And so if you don't practice, you don't get better at it. And I didn't practice, so I didn't get better at it. And so cooking is my form of art that requires slightly fewer years of practice to get good at.
Yeah. I absolutely love to cook. I actually almost ended up a chef at one point.
Really?
Oh yeah, years ago. I worked one summer at a restaurant as my friend's sous chef, and I was like, well, never gonna do this again. Can't take the hours. It's especially during the summer. It's brutally hot, and it's a lot. And I wasn't even like my friend being a full chef worked more time, more hours, was more stressed than I was. And I was like, I don't know how you do this, and I'm not going to. This seems like I'm not going to live long enough to enjoy any of this. I'm just going to die from stress at a very young age. So I opted not to.
Yeah, hey, that's fair. I've never worked in the restaurant industry, but I have watched The Bear, so I guess it's this new show that is somewhat recent. In the last couple of months, it's gotten a lot of like critical acclaim online. It's about a guy who works in a kitchen. So it's related, I guess, kind of.
Yeah, no, it works. I've worked in other kinds of kitchens other than just like a really nice restaurant. I tried working at a deli. I tried working at like a diner and stuff. And I was like, wow, I'm going to end up hating cooking. So I'm just going to walk away from this. And
being able to identify that early, like, and say, you know what, even if there are aspects of it that you like, but like, this isn't going to be good for me in the long term. Like, identifying that and having the like wherewithal and like understanding of yourself to say, you know what, I got to step away from this. Like that is a great sign of like being a very like on top of things person. Kudos to you.
And now I still love to cook, which makes me super happy. And I have a couple of friends that love to eat, so that makes it perfect. And I get to like absolutely blow their minds every once in a while with some sort of dish that they're like, this is something you would get at a 5-star restaurant. Yeah, I know. I even plate the same, so we're good. I gotta be all fancy.
The perfect pair.
Yeah. So, yeah. So, I'm going to ask a question because
All right.
not that I don't exactly know what it is, but in a way I don't. What is a community manager? What does your job entail? How does this work?
Yeah. Hey, that is a great question. And the funny thing about that is it's honestly maybe one of the questions that I answer most in life, because I think community management is, while it's somewhat prominent in the gaming world, isn't something that really exists outside of the gaming space. And that's changing a little bit. Facebook has community managers, for instance, now, and so it's expanding into other industries, but it's still fairly like new and fairly. I don't even know quite what the word here is. It's something that, since a lot of people don't know what it is, they just kind of make assumptions. So I'm happy to talk about it.
Right.
I could explain this in one of two ways, and you tell me which one you'd prefer. I could talk about like the responsibilities and the skills involved, or I could talk about more like the scenarios and maybe like the value that a community manager brings. Which do you think is going to, better answer your question here?
So I think what I'm looking for is what everyone thinks a community manager is.
Yeah.
It is
Yeah.
literally, I have so many people that genuinely believe this is someone who comes on and takes care of your socials and takes care of your Discord, and like somebody who runs your community, because it said implied in game. But I know that it's more nuanced than that. And I think that I'm trying to answer or ask a question. There we go. For everyone else who's like, do I even need a community manager? What on earth would I be hiring somebody for? Or do I want to be a community manager? What am I, expecting or should be expected thereof?
Okay, yeah, that's great clarity. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I have just demonstrated one of the key skills that you need to be a community manager, which is to ask good questions and understand what the problem or issue at hand is, so you can better resolve it. I would say, in short, misconceptions aside, community managers do certainly tend to wear a lot of hats. So you mentioned, running a Discord or running social media. Those are all responsibilities that some community managers have. But I would say that those, especially social media, tend to be kind of on top of or above what the core community manager role is. And so obviously, I'm giving you my definition, just like, any job. I think there's a little bit of interpretation for how exactly, you'd think about it. But
Right.
At least as far as I'm concerned, I think that community management is one of like two or three key responsibilities, and I'll kind of lay them out here and talk about what the value that they bring to a company is, or even like a volunteer Discord space, right? Like nonprofits have community managers. In the tabletop space here, there are streaming communities that have community managers, and those are sometimes volunteer positions as opposed to paid positions. So just kind of talk broadly about what I think a community manager should do, and then on top of that, tend to wear a lot of hats.
Right.
So I think like the core, like if we think about what a community manager is, the heart of that job is you are, I don't want to say the face, because that feels almost more like PR oriented, but you
Right.
are oftentimes the primary point of contact that a member of your audience or your community will have with the company. You are the person who answers the tough questions in Discord, or who, if you're not handling customer support, you are, involved with and overseeing, customer support. And so are for lack of a better phrase here, and maybe you can help me with this, the public face, but like in internal spaces. So in community-owned spaces, in your spaces, like your Discord, like your forums, you tend to be kind of the voice of authority
Right.
in that space. And that also comes with the responsibility of, since you are the person that talks with the fans and the community the most, you are the representative of the community's interests in meetings, in planning things, in developing new products inside the company. So, for instance, some responsibilities that I have at Demiplane, we make digital tools for tabletop games. So we're a software company and a tabletop games company. Before any product that we release goes out, I do a QA pass on it, where I go through and I say, okay, is this going to confuse someone who's new to this game, who's never used our tools before? If they come across this page, are they going to know what to do? And a lot of the time, as we're going through, I'll be like, oh, we've received feedback from the community about this. They prefer that we show this piece of information in this way instead of that way. Or, hey, we've determined in the past that our best practice is to have a button like this here, as opposed to hiding that over here. And so it's little things like that, where you're kind of the
It sounds more like you're the voice of the community than technically the company.
Well, yes. I think it's pretty common in meetings or conversations at work for us to be talking about something. I'll go, oh, that's right, and we also need to remember this, that, and the other thing from a recent conversation in Discord. Or oh, hey, we did get a question about this, and I want to make sure that we give a sufficient answer back. In order to make sure that the community is aware of what we're doing and how we're addressing their concerns about this tool not working quite the right way. Or recently there's been conversations about things like AI artwork in the tabletop space. Like, how have we given a sufficient answer about those concerns? And so it's a lot of listening. So you're monitoring the community spaces. You're hearing the concerns that people have in your space, and then it's going back to the company and saying, hey, here are the concerns. How do we want to address this? How do we want to handle this? What can we do to make life easier or better for our audience, for our customers who are invested in what we're doing? And then how do we turn around and communicate that back in a way that demonstrates that we've heard your concern, or we appreciate this bug report, or we value the input that you've given us, and here's what our plan is, and here's how we're doing it. And that's both for like positive things in terms of I think, like, when I say that, right, it would be easy to go like, oh, like, there's an issue and we've heard your concerns and we're going to address the issue. That's also like positive, like, hey, I love your tools. I have a question about this. Could we do something like that? I think that would be a really like nice quality of life thing. And we go, yeah, that's a great piece of feedback. Here's what we're going to try to do with that. And sometimes you can't promise anything. So you say, hey, that's a great piece of feedback. We're going to like take that and look at it internally and see if there's anything we can do with it. But it's kind of being the person that the audience has a relationship with. Right. And there is a big relational component to it. I've developed friendships with members of the Demiplane community over these past 2 years that I've been here, and it's great. I love that I have a job that lets me, an extroverted person, like talk to people and meet people and have those relationships that form over time, which is exciting. And then on top of that, I also get to do things that make it easier for people to play games and have fun. So that's like the heart of what a community manager is. But I also, I think one of the like key components there is when you are in touch with your community, you get a sense for what their concerns are and what their wants and needs are. And so then if you're going to do something or release something that doesn't quite meet those needs, you can often catch that before something goes out and say, hey, you know what, like this isn't quite up to our standards, or hey, we got some pushback when we released something like this because it didn't do what our users expected it to.
Right.
Let's avoid that this time around. Let's learn from our past experience. We had to redo this thing. Let's just do it that way the first time here, and kind of shortcut the feedback process. And I've been fortunate in my role to not really ever have to like step in and say, hey, like we're going off track. We need to get back on the right course. But I do think that is one of like the key. If I was like make a pitch to an executive somewhere, like, hey, why do you need a community manager at your company? It's because their job is to say, hey, if you do that, the community is going to be mad about it. Here's why I think that. Here's my facts. Show me the Carfax. Here they are.
Right.
And I don't think we should move forward with this current plan of action. And then if you continue to move forward with that plan of action, and then you get a negative response, one, your community manager gets to say, I told you so. And two, you should give them a raise.
Right.
So, I think that's kind of the general like description that I would give. But it's very true that community managers wear a lot of hats.
Right.
It's been, I would say, less so in the last year. But in my first year as a community manager at Demiplane, I did do a lot of the social media stuff because our team was small, and so we didn't quite have the bandwidth for. We didn't have the budget to hire someone to do that specifically, and so
Right.
that was a responsibility that fell on my plate, and I did as good of a job as I could, given my other time constraints and responsibilities, and that's okay, so like there's certainly specific scenarios there, but I do think there are different skill sets that you need as a community manager and as a social media manager. That make it so that you could have two different people in those roles. And, I'd argue that if your community manager is going to also be a social media manager, that means they have to not be doing something else that you might want them to do in order to have the bandwidth to manage social media. Like all things, there's only 24 hours in a day. And, if you're only working 8 hours that day, you need to make sure that you don't have 12 hours worth of work to do in an 8-hour day, because that leads to a bad day.
I also think it's important that it is the difference is distinguished. Like, just because somebody can be a community manager doesn't mean that they should be working your social media. Marketing is a very different animal altogether.
Yes.
I think that, we're all, most of us are really tiny companies or artists, and it's just us type of thing. And I think that a lot of times that we hope that if we do work with somebody else, that they'll be able to fill in those spots. And I think a lot of us try to say yes in an effort to one, we want to work with a company or work on a project or whatever. And then just keep saying yes because, but I come from a corporate background. There is a huge difference between being a liaison between someone's audience and being a marketer. There's a whole lot that goes into it. And not to say that they can't, but just the expectations that a lot of people have especially when you're a tiny company, you don't exactly know what someone else does. It is so hard at times not to just like push particular things on them.
Yeah, it's true. Well, and
Yeah.
I think, in an ideal world, your community manager probably should be, involved. They should be in the room as you're thinking about how are you messaging things on social media.
Oh, absolutely.
But that doesn't mean that they have to be the same person. I think, ideally, right, you would have a team that includes, a dedicated social media person and a dedicated community manager, and the two of them can work together with your marketing person, your marketing team, and it all kind of flows together nicely. But
right.
I know some community managers where their role is so much focused on like the feedback and the product testing and that kind of thing that they're more of like a product manager as their kind of additional responsibility on top of community, as opposed to being marketing or social media. So that's where the specifics of the job and what your business need is that you're trying to fill, I think changes what you could do as a community manager. It's kind of a deliberately flexible position, and that you can do a lot of things, but also maybe there's some of those responsibilities that someone else is better suited to somewhere else in the organization structure.
Right. So in other words, just ask.
Well, there is that.
Yeah. You want to hire somebody, they're like, hey, I'm a community manager. Ask them specifically what their skills are.
Yeah.
And then this way, and I think this is hilarious because I just had this conversation with somebody yesterday. It's a small company, and they came to me for some advice and some recommendations. And essentially, they went to hire somebody and just made a lot of assumptions about what this person could or couldn't do and what they would be doing at the company. And I was like, well, did you check that they even could do it? And they're like, oh, well, it's somebody in the community and we know them, pretty well. And I was like, yeah, that didn't answer my question.
Yeah.
If you hire somebody, it's like the same thing when someone asked me about, I was like, oh, I don't, can't take on a new commission. They're like, can you, reference me for somebody? And I'm like, I can't, because I don't know what kind of project you're trying to do. Just like anything else, there's a bunch of cartographers that specialize in a particular style. Everyone who asked me to do sci-fi maps, I was like, you have the wrong person. I do high fantasy, and that's my specialty. There's so many other cartographers out there who do that. Go ask one of them. Here's how you find them. And it should be the same with anybody. If you are, especially as a small company, absolutely ask. The assumption that we have that we understand what someone else's definition of their position is at a company, we should never be doing that. We should always be asking and clarifying and making sure.
I had the good fortune of running and moderating a panel about community management at Gen Con this past year. And we went down the line and kind of listed off like each of our respective responsibilities at our jobs. And, there were a lot of similar things, but there were also a lot of like different things that came up too, where, I would say like most acutely, right? I was talking about, kind of learning the social media voice at Demiplane when I first got started. And then, in sharp contrast to that, Danny, Brutal Dan, who's the community manager at Roll20, talked about how, he was hired there to be the brand voice. And so the company took on his brand voice on social media, whereas it was completely the opposite way around for me, where I kind of took on the brand social media voice at Demiplane. And that was just like such a great, like, snapshot of how these specific expectations of one community manager over another can be very, very different, even though it's the same job title at the very least. But yeah, like all things, there's a lot of nuance But I would say, the one constant is, as a community manager, you are the point of contact with your company and your community, and it's a great responsibility. It can also be a lot of work, trying to keep track of who's asked for what, and what things we've promised, and what things we are trying to do but haven't promised publicly because we can't talk about it yet. And so there's certainly yeah, I don't know, I don't want to wax poetic for too long here, but it's there's challenges just like anything.
Right.
There's rewards just like anything. If you like people, and you have a very high capacity to be empathetic, community management might be right for you. But you do a lot of listening to complaints, both valid ones and ones that are unfounded, and you have to have the patience and ability to deal with people who are oftentimes not at their best because they're upset that something isn't working right, or they feel entitled to something because this didn't go the way that they thought it should, or they're frustrated because something isn't doing what it should, and there's a problem and you didn't fix it right away because
it happened 2 seconds ago.
It happened 2 seconds ago, or sometimes, right?
Right.
We're a software company. If there's a bug, sometimes it takes a little while to fix that. Right. We're pretty good and we're pretty fast, but there's always going to be something that takes longer than you want to troubleshoot, longer than you want to fix, and unrealistic expectations that are set without realizing what's happening behind the scenes can certainly lead to some frustrated customers here and there too. So that's I feel like community management is something that either you are born for it or you're not.
Right. I am not, but it does sound like something that if anyone's running a Kickstarter would be a really good idea.
Yeah, there's a huge component to that in terms of just answering the questions and being that voice that people can trust is communicating information back reliably, and isn't going missing for 4 months and things like that.
Right. Well, I think, another thing is, again, as small companies or individuals that are doing everything ourselves, I think it's always so hard for us to I'll be able to answer the questions better, or I'll know,
yeah,
I want the direct feedback. And I'm gonna absolutely say that anybody who can take the stress off of your plate helps you be more creative and helps you do what you need to do in order to make a viable product.
Yeah.
And
yeah, absolutely.
I think it's important that we understand, again, as tiny companies, we're all like, oh, well, I can't afford this or whatever. There are things that will cost you more money in the long run because you're the one doing it. And I think if you are making a product where you are building an audience that will have continuous communication with you, absolutely hire somebody to either take over your socials and or to be your community manager, because most people don't realize the huge difference that all these little conversations have in a day. What I love is back when I used to do corporate stuff, we used to do a lot of time management, and we would, just to prove a point, we would have people sit down and write down, if you clock everything that you do in a day, how many times, how long you are on the phone, how many things you picked up when you went to this, and then literally look at, it's for you. We're not here to spy on you. But pay attention to how much time are you spending answering people's questions on the internet, or answering emails, or things that someone else could be doing that eat away at your time. And it's usually a lot more than people realize.
Yeah.
And I'm always very big on smaller companies don't realize that it's just as important for them to have somebody who can take things off of their plate, or more important if you think about it, because you're the sole creator of whatever product you're creating, and that includes your art is a product. All of that really adds up. And the more that you have that eats away at that time or that energy or that mental place to be creative, the more that eats away at that, the less you're going to make, and the harder it is going to be to make a sustainable income. So, even if it's somebody part-time, and be like, hey, can I pay you for 5 hours a week to just kind of help me with this?
Yeah.
It's
Yeah,
worth it.
absolutely. We were talking about this a little bit before, and I'll just kind of share, the brief anecdote that I made. I consider myself to be a creative person. When I first got involved in the tabletop space online a number of years back, I loved checking in on Twitter. I'm not an artist per se, but I do like to write. I like to design my own games. I like to, I do enjoy creating things. I tend to use, written and spoken word as opposed to, drawing, because that's where my skill set lies.
Right.
I often find that at the end of a workday, I struggle to put together very concise or clear sentences because so much of my brain power in the day has been spent. Okay, how do I explain this in a way that makes sense? Okay,
Yes.
How do I answer this question? And again, and again, and again. And how do I, communicate the weight of what this means to our community, to our internal stakeholders? And it's a lot of not just written communication and spoken communication, but thought going into how do I express that very clearly? And how do I make my point in a way that conveys, both, the significance of what we're talking about, but then also, acknowledges that that's not something we can get to right now.
Right.
How do I handle all of these kind of conflicting values or conflicting priorities as I communicate? And at the end of the day, I'm ready to log off the internet. I don't want to be online. I don't want to go and think and write something creative. I want to go and watch some TV or play a video game and just turn my brain off, because I have spent all day thinking very carefully and tactically about how do I phrase this? How do I phrase this? How are we communicating about this? And I don't have the capacity to be as creative as I would like to be working on, my own personal projects in the evenings. And so to what you were saying earlier about, if you're, getting started and, think you can handle it, that type of communication best, yeah, you might be able to handle it better than someone else at first, but you're taking so much mental energy away from yourself by being the person who handles all of those community conversations. You will save yourself countless hours of mental and creative workload by having someone else handle the customer support issues and the questions in Discord and communicating that stuff out. You can still be involved with press releases and marketing stuff as needed. Obviously things should go through you if they're talking about something that you're creating. But the more that you let someone else handle the things that they can handle, the more you're freeing yourself up to handle the things that only you can handle.
Yeah. It is important that, especially if you are the main creative, that you give yourself the ability to be just that, as creative as possible. It's sort of like So I used to work and train a lot of admins and everything else in that work directly for like CEOs of companies or the main creators. Same concept, where I would turn around and tell them, like, your job is to make it so whatever they're doing, they have the ability to make money.
Yeah.
They sustain this company. They make it so you have a paycheck, so you have a job, and so make their job as easy as possible, and that allows the company to make more money. And that works regardless of the size of a company.
Mm-hmm.
The more that you can give yourself the ability to be creative, to not feel weighed down mentally every day, at the end of the day, or beginning of it for that matter, because you're sitting there trying to answer everybody's emails, because for some strange reason, we all do it first thing in the morning and then ruin our entire day.
Yep.
So, we got to stop doing that. And, just, I mean, and again, it isn't easy to immediately be able to hire somebody. So there's nothing the matter with putting a call out on your socials saying, hey, we're a tiny company, or we're just starting, or it's just me. I'm just an artist and I want to work with somebody part-time, or, whatever the case may be. Putting it out there doesn't hurt and doesn't cost anything. And you might find that there's somebody out there who is looking to get into becoming a community manager and would like some experience without getting paid much or at all. For sometimes don't let people work for you for free, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Pay everybody who works for you, also because that's just the right thing to do, but you're going to regret it if you don't.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, especially like when you're getting started, I got started doing stuff, on a volunteer basis for a Discord community. I was, a mod and admin in that Discord community for a while. And that was my first, formal community role that I had. I did it because I liked the space, and eventually, I had those skills developed. And of course, I also was in the workforce in the corporate world for a couple of years, and so had plenty of corporate experience to kind of back up that informal community experience, and was able to point to all those things, which eventually got me into the job that I have now, where I am a community manager. I get paid to do that, which is nice to get paid to do something that you would have done for free in other places, right? And other scenarios. It's like, oh yeah, that feels good. Like for the first time in my life at this job, I wake up in the morning and I am excited about sitting down at my computer to start work. I used to work in healthcare. I used to work in tech.
Oh,
not the case. I would wake up and I would dread getting out of bed. Right. I would wake up. I'd be like, oh, okay, well, let me hit the snooze button and put off going to work as much as I possibly can. And now I wake up and I'm excited about it. I have found it's very helpful for me to take the first 30 minutes of my day. I have a dog. His name is Trinket. I take care of Trinket's needs first, because obviously the dog is more important than me. I get him taken care of, food, water. We go outside. We, get his medicine for the day because he's got bad joints. And so, he's taking supplements to help that. And once he's settled, I get my coffee, I get my breakfast, and I just sit down at my desk. Don't turn my computer on yet. And I do 10 to 15 minutes of mental exercises. I play chess. On my phone, I use the chess.com app. They have daily puzzles, and I do my daily puzzles first, and I warm my brain up, and then I sit down and I start doing actual day job work. And
I do Sudoku.
Yeah, it's so helpful to just turn your brain on at a pace that isn't
Yep. It's how I start
mode.
Every day. It's how I end every day. And it's just really nice to have something where, it's not that it's mindless, because it's a brain exercise, but that you automatically, the rules and everything else, how it's supposed to go. But it's a puzzle and it has nothing to do with your job, has nothing to do with other people or anything else. It's just a nice little mental exercise, and I start and end my day like that. So that's funny.
Yeah, it's a nice routine that I've been doing, and it really helps so much, just like ground me before I start the day, before I, log on and see the emails and see all the Slack messages and, deal with whatever problems today is going to present. It's nice just like have 10 minutes of just like, peace, coffee, chess.
Right. So is that how you handle the negativity that you have to deal with? Or is there something specific you do? Do you have mantras? Do you work out? Do you...
Yeah.
What do you do?
Great question. Obviously, like lots of jobs have stress. Any job where you are dealing directly with the public, I think, has a very high capacity to be a stressful position, just because people are complicated, and I mean that in a good way, right? Like we have complex needs, desires, motivations, but also sometimes we can be demanding too, and so there are certainly days that are tough and that are stressful. I have a couple of things that I do to deal with that. Obviously, these are what work for me, and not necessarily going to work for everyone else.
Right.
But I am the primary caretaker of our dog, so to speak. And so anytime I'm having a rough day, if we go outside, I'm like, hey, let's take a nice long walk around the block. Let's take 10 minutes, feel the sun on my face, take some deep breaths, not think about whatever it is that's the issue that's causing stress for the day, and get my fresh air, get some steps in. And so that's a very helpful thing. I have Spotify playlists for every possible scenario I could encounter in my day. And so I have a playlist of songs that I find calming. And so it is my like soothing, calming playlist. So if I'm having a rough day, I put on that playlist and it soothes me. It eases my sorrows, whatever they may be. And then, I'm also, I get along great with my dad. He's one of my best friends. And so if I am having a tough time dealing with something, I'll give him a call like at the end of the workday. We'll hang out, we'll talk for a little bit. We don't live super close right now. We're about an hour away. So it's not always convenient to like meet up somewhere. And so we'll still like hop on a Zoom call together and like, have a beer and just talk about whatever it is that, we're dealing with. And, he, of course, also, he works in higher education as, the associate dean at a graduate school. And so he knows a thing or two about dealing with stressful days. And so, we'll have our drink and talk about the various, things that have happened in the last couple of days and how we're stressed out about this, that, or the other thing, and how we're trying to solve things. And it's a great, like, bonding opportunity to say, hey, here's what I'm dealing with. I know you understand. We can commiserate together. And then, kind of move forward going, okay, yeah, all right, I feel better about what we're going to do. I've gotten it out. Sometimes all you really need to do is just like express like the stress and the worries and the frustrations that you have. And by expressing it, you've processed them and then they're out of the way and you can go back to problem solving. Yep. But yeah, I worked in a very high stress scenario in healthcare right out of college for a couple of years. And so developed some of these techniques very, very early on for dealing with stressful situations. But, also, right, like doing it for a long time, I have developed a certain, immunity to it, much like, you take a vaccine and then whatever the disease is doesn't get you. I am so inoculated to like stressful work environments at this point that it takes like something truly monumental to get to me.
Right.
It's happened maybe like 5 times in the last 2 years, because I am fortunate to have. Well, I actually don't think it's fortunate. Honestly, I think it's probably a trauma response. But I'm fortunate that I can get through whatever it is and then deal with my emotions and process the stress afterwards in a safe space once the high stress scenario is past.
Right. Yeah, we actually talk a lot about mental health on here, and because it's as much as this is all pun intended fun and games, it is a very stressful, especially right now. It's a very stressful industry.
Yeah.
We're watching tons of people get fired, and the industry is changing really rapidly right now. And there's a lot of people who don't quite know where they're going to fit in.
Yeah.
There's so much coming out, and dealing with things like AI and artists feeling like they're being replaced, and writers for that matter as well. And it's at times it is hard to, because you want this to be your job. You love doing what you do. But nobody wants to do it part-time. Everyone wants to, like, I want to quit this horrible job and go and work in, tabletop games full-time. We would all love that. That sounds awesome.
Yeah.
It's just not entirely that feasible, especially if you do have a hard time with stress, because when you are the sole provider and you're a freelancer and you have to deal with people not paying your invoices, or people paying you 60 to 90 days after a project, or that project never seeing the light of day, and although you may have gotten paid, you now spent all that time creating something that you can't use on a portfolio or that you can't share on the internet.
Mm-hmm.
So there's tons of things that end up going along with it. And I think that a lot of times we don't necessarily realize that we should really be calling it, stress, because it is, because we talk about burnout and we talk about, being creative so much that, or doing so much that you end up having burnout. Now, let's call it stress, because it is.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think, one, you hit the nail on the head, but then two, just like looking at where we're at as the games industry right now, during the era of the pandemic, I'm not going to say that it's over because it's not, but during the era of the pandemic where everyone was quarantining at home, folks were looking for things to do. And so there was this huge boom, and there was a huge investment in the games industry.
Mm-hmm.
And now that quarantine isn't really a thing that people are doing anymore, except for, in certain, scenarios. But like by and large, it seems like much of society has gone back to normal, or something that, resembles a pre-COVID world. And the challenging thing there is, the industry is shifting with that, as how people spend their money and spend their time is changing. And it's really, kind of stressful and, I won't say unprecedented change, but there's a lot happening in the space right now that is unpredictable, and there's uncertainty. And on top of that, the ways that we're doing things is changing, and the technology, both good and bad, is changing. And I think we're kind of also at an inflection point where the interests and the needs of the gaming audience, right, the larger community, both in video games and tabletop games, is kind of changing. There's a change in preference and taste, and we've got to adjust accordingly and keep up with those changes. And it's something that is difficult to navigate. And so there's a lot of uncertainty. The last 2 years, I feel like, have been filled with uncertainty, and that's okay. It comes with the territory, but it definitely takes a toll. And so when I was in high school, I thought I wanted to become a pastor. Because I was interested in like public speaking, and I thought like that's the only way to like be a public speaker, right? I wasn't in professional circles. I didn't know about like TED Talks and things like that really at that point. And the idea of being an influencer at the time isn't something that I was interested in, because that was like 3 or 4 YouTubers, and that's about it. Because that hadn't really like become a viable profession yet. And I had a conversation with one of my dad's friends who is a pastor. And he told me, if you can imagine yourself doing anything else and being happy doing it, do that instead, because the stress and the challenge related to being a pastor is such that if you're not cut out for it,
right,
you're not going to love it. And I think that the same can probably be said of working in the tabletop space or in the games industry right now, is just the amount of uncertainty there is. If you could do anything else and be happy, satisfied doing it, not feeling like, I hate waking up every morning, it's games or nothing for me.
Right.
You should probably consider another line of work, at least until things settle down and we get past this moment of intense change. And I think it'll happen, and we'll settle down, and we'll have another period of growth and expansion and innovation. And I think a lot of the innovation and growth that we're going to see because of this change and uncertainty is going to be great. But we've got to get through the rapids first before we get back to smooth sailing.
I'm going to have to say that even if there wasn't uncertainty, if there is anything else that someone wants to do and they would be happy with, they might want to consider that over actually getting an occupation in gaming. As a creative, as we were talking about before, I went to work at a restaurant, at a really, really nice one as well. So I got great pay, and I worked for a summer, and it was fantastic. And it was long hours, and yes, it was stressful, but I actually had a lot of fun doing it, and it was a fantastic learning experience because it taught me that if I don't have a passion for something, a genuine passion, not just a like for it, or this is fun, or I like the notoriety, or whatever. I have a genuine passion for something, and I have an opportunity to do it. I better make sure that it goes beyond just me really liking to do it, because when that becomes your every waking moment, it becomes your job. It becomes what you do on your time off, because especially when you first start, in this industry, you are, to get your name out there, you are gaming, you are creating games, you are making art for games, everything becomes the tabletop industry 24/7, it feels like. And you absolutely have to love that, or you will become sick of playing the game, or hearing anything about it, or being involved in it, or dealing with the community. And the moment you don't want to deal with the community, you should walk away. We watch so many people who get tired of dealing with the community, and then they just say the dumbest things. And whether they had a bad day or they didn't mean it, or whatever the case may be, they quite clearly weren't thinking, said something that they really shouldn't have. And a lot of it comes down to, it is because you have made this job, or this hobby, your job, And it is constant and every day, even on your quote unquote days off or your time off.
Yeah.
You know, especially as a creative, because all of your projects turn into like, well, what does this have to do? What can I put this into with like gaming? Like, I'm making a tarot card deck, which technically shouldn't have anything to do with the tabletop space. And yet here I am making a world building aspect to it, because of course everything I do has to do with the tabletop space.
Yeah. No, absolutely. That's a phenomenal point. It very quickly becomes all encompassing.
Yes.
I feel like, and I can't say what it is for other people, but D&D and tabletop gaming in general used to be like a hobby and a fun thing that I did, in my free time. And now I still enjoy it, but I would rather do anything else in my free time because it feels like work.
Right.
And
everything feels work related.
Is great. I like having bills paid, but man, it doesn't refill the tank like it used to because it's work.
Right. Oh yeah, the moment I don't have to draw maps. I mean, and again, I love drawing maps. Obviously, I have a huge passion for it. But it's now my job. So when there's times where I don't have to draw a map, I don't.
Yep.
I will doodle anything.
What's your favorite thing to doodle?
I actually love botany. I used to do botany drawings for a friend of mine.
Okay.
And I love doing those. I love drawing skulls apparently a lot.
Skulls are cool.
Yeah. I've done a lot of that. I actually started off when in my art career, I don't know how else to phrase that. When I very first started drawing, I used to sell a lot of tattoo art. Okay. Which is probably why there's so many people that are like, oh my God, that could totally, you should do tattoos. No, I can draw the tattoo art. I don't want to be a tattooist because I don't like a screaming, moving, or bleeding canvas.
Yeah, I imagine that makes it hard to do good line work.
Yeah, just a little bit, And I used to be really bad where I couldn't sit down and start a piece and not finish it. So I'd have to sit there throughout the entire thing. And it took me a long time to ever learn to I can walk away from it and still pick it up, where I left off. That took a lot of patience and training for me to do.
Yeah.
I still love drawing tattoo art, and I do it for friends and stuff all the time. I have a lot of my art tattooed on people, actually.
That's good to know. I've been thinking about. I don't have any tattoos currently, but I've been thinking about it. Athena and I have been talking about getting a pair of tattoos when we get married. But I've had other tattoos kind of in mind that I just haven't quite set my heart on what exactly it is I want, and so haven't done it yet. Right. I'll have to keep that in mind if
I'm gonna say
doodles out there.
Because I used to work in tattoo parlors. I basically grew up in them. Have your, whatever you decide that you want to do, don't go to another artist and have them draw it. Go to the person that you want to tattoo you, tell them your concept and have them draw it. Because that's what your tattoo will look like.
That makes sense.
Yeah, you can't guarantee that someone else can copy the artwork that you hired someone else to do.
You're right. Nobody else out there is Devin Rue. What was I thinking?
I know, right? Really, come on. Well, the other thing is this answers your question as to whether or not someone can do specific shading or, if they can capture what you're looking to have put on you permanently. Can't stress enough. Make sure your tattoo artist can do it, which means have them draw it.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. That's a good piece of life advice.
Yeah, there you go. See, as a woman absolutely covered in tattoos, definitely make sure somebody can draw.
Yeah, at least one person needs to draw.
Right. I've handed somebody my own artwork because all of my tattoos are my own art. And it is hilarious because I handed somebody else some of my art, and I started having a tattoo put on my my shoulder for it. And then a very short time into the tattoo, I lost all confidence that this person could actually create what I wanted, and I had it covered.
Okay.
Yeah. I should have had them draw it. Or I should have, because everyone else who's ever tattooed me is somebody that I've, sat in the parlor and watched them do a lot of work for, so I know that they could tattoo, and this was somebody that I didn't know as well, and I really wish I had. So yeah, definitely make sure your tattooist can draw what you want.
Man, we're just handing out gems today, I see.
Right? I mean, that's what this podcast is about. Nothing but gems all the time.
Good.
Yeah. This is this is life coaching.
Well, that's
just in a weird way.
That's valuable, actually. I mean, really, truly, like, I think of, younger Josh, high school, college, early career. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I didn't know who I wanted to be. I'd argue I still don't know what I want to do necessarily, but I'm taking it, one step at a time and figuring it out as I go. But having people who could just sit me down and be like, okay, here's what you need to know about this. Here's what you need to know about this. These are the questions that you need to ask yourself before you start working in this field or that field. It's so valuable to just think through, what are the things that I'm not thinking about because I have no experience in that area. And so it's outside of my even understanding to think about,
Right. Well, that's kind of the reason that I started. So when I started this podcast, it was just supposed to be for fun and talking to people. And it was supposed to be about maps or art. And then, just to have fun and showcase some of the people whose art I love, type of thing. And then immediately after the first episode, I talked to Aaron Radney, and we started talking about world building, and it was great and everything. I got a bunch of questions from somebody who had listened to the episode, which I was like, oh my God, somebody listened. That's awesome. They asked me a bunch of questions about getting in the industry. And I was like, oh, that's funny, because, we can kind of cover those. I had Kate May on, and then I just started every time that someone would come on the show, and we would, no matter my intention had been at the beginning, we immediately started talking about being in this business and in this industry. And I was like, all right, this is clearly what this podcast is meant to be. I'm just going to accept that. And and I get some really great comments and questions from people. It's interesting to hear what other people think it is like to work in this industry. And then they start listening to the podcast and they're like, oh, no, it's not that at all. No, I don't know anybody in this industry who gets to sit around and just play tabletop games all day and somehow earns a living.
Yeah.
Everybody has tons of other stuff that's involved in, whether it's marketing or advertising or getting sponsors or, creating other products or merch or what, there's so much more involved. There's nobody I know who's out there just plays games all day, and that'd be great though.
That would be great. That would be the dream, honestly.
Right?
But, much like this podcast, it takes on a life of its own.
Yes, it does. Well, and again, this is one of the reasons why I wanted to have you on, because a big part of this industry is our communities.
Yeah.
You can't get anywhere in this industry without building a community, not necessarily a brand, which, that is helpful.
It does help.
Right. But everything in this community is so very word of mouth, and us all talking about what we love or the games that we like or particular mods or artists or whatever, because it's such a it's such a do-it-yourself type of industry, but also that we are so absolutely thrive on recommendations. nothing gets me more interested in wanting to play a game than hearing a bunch of people who just played it and were like, oh my God, this is great about it. This is horrible about it. This is, like, their excitement gets me excited. And that's how this works. And we're all a bunch of nerds and we all really want to nerd out with each other.
Yeah.
So you have to build an audience. You have to connect with everybody in this community to at least some degree, or else you aren't really going to be able to do this as for a living. You'll still have to do other things to bring in a better income.
Yeah, well, it's definitely, like you said, like there's a huge component. I don't want to say it's about who you know, but a lot of it is very much like relationship oriented, right? You're going to build a relationship with the people that you work with. You're going to build a relationship with your fans or with your customers or with the people who, are just paying for your work, whatever it might be. And as you build those relationships, it's really, it's important, I think, to be intentional in how you're building them and interacting with people and treating people and all that stuff. And this isn't anything new. This isn't any, sage piece of advice that hasn't been recited 100 times before. But, people are going to remember how working with you made them feel, how they felt talking to you, how they felt working with you, whether, they felt like their opinions were valued, whether they felt like, they were better working with you as opposed to working without you. And so much of the industry isn't, like I said, it's not about who you know, but it's about how you're able to work with and interact with other people and the impression that they get working with you. And so the ways in which you navigate the space are so important. And it kind of sucks, honestly, that like so much of someone's success can be determined by their ability to like interact socially, right? That certainly puts people with certain types of skill sets, certain interpersonal tendencies to maybe be at an advantage versus a disadvantage. And so there's a component where that's really unfortunate and frustrating for folks. And I know folks who I think that is one of their least favorite things about working in the industry and the job.
And an even more important reason to hire a community manager.
An even more important reason to hire a community manager. Exactly. Yep. But, I think there is, it's one of those things that like, whether you want to do it or don't, just go into it, like knowing full well what you're getting into. But,
I never want to discourage anyone from ever wanting to be a part of this community or to do this full time. I would just, having had the conversations I have had with people who have been grossly taken advantage of, who's done hours upon hours upon hours of basically free labor, who have been stressed out, burned out, and absolutely feeling as if they don't want to be a part of it. I've watched so many people walk away from this industry in the years that I've been in it, where I don't want anyone to ever come into it blindly and think that it's just, I don't ever want to discourage anyone, but I also don't want to be unrealistic and be like, yeah, it's all, rainbows and, unicorns, because it's not. It's still work. It's just, it's the gaming industry, and there's a lot that goes on in it, and it's very nuanced. And sometimes it really does feel like a popularity contest.
Yeah.
But I can guarantee that is exactly how it feels, but not how it actually is. Although we see the same people in the same spaces or the same projects or, playing together, a lot of that has to do with what I was just talking about, where there is so much communication of this was a great person to work with or this person wasn't. We have seen some bad actors come out in the community, and you notice they are nowhere now.
Yeah. Yeah,
because
absolutely.
we are so absolutely, we don't want to, if you're going to be an asshole, we don't want any part of you.
Mm-hmm.
So be great to work with as best to your ability. And there is, being that one, we're all a bunch of nerds, and two, a lot of us come, with our own mental health baggage, so to speak. Being forthright and turning around and telling somebody like, hey, before we go into the meeting, just so you know, I'm autistic or I have ADHD, and I just want to precursor any conversations that I'm going to have with you so that you're aware. It's not you. It's not like I'm disinterested or anything along those lines. It's I have ADHD.
Yeah.
Or whatever the case is. There's nothing the matter with stating every conversation you have, prefacing every conversation you have with that, because it helps people know what they're getting into and being like, oh, okay, that's fine.
Yeah, no, definitely.
Everything here is a relationship, a very close relationship. Even if it's somebody that's just hiring me to make a map, this is a very personal and a very emotional industry, especially the tabletop within gaming.
Yeah.
So, be prepared.
Yeah. And I mean, it makes sense, right? Like, these are personal stories that we tell, right, at the table. They're characters that we pour ourselves into. So it makes sense that it's so personal. But, I have even, unfortunately seen scenarios where, someone I know just handled a situation poorly. They're not a bad person. They didn't necessarily do anything wrong. They just, like, were not very professional in how they interacted with someone, or they, put their foot in their mouth and then didn't realize it. And it has caused them to lose out on, work and jobs.
Yes.
And it's a shame to see things like that happen. But at the same time, because of how important, the relational component is, it's something you got to figure out quick, I think, to succeed. Is how are you, like, what's the impression that you're leaving people with? What are you doing to protect, this sounds so like unauthentic and corporate, but what are you doing to protect the brand image that you have for yourself? Right? Like, are you leaving an impression that someone's like, oh, like, yeah, that Josh guy, man, he called me mean names on the internet, and he spit his gum out in front of me, and I stepped in it, and now I'm mad at him, like that's the type of thing that, like, it seems silly, and the specific gum example, probably wouldn't actually be like a big deal, but sometimes it feels like you do something that, it's so silly, it's so inconsequential, but it means so much to someone else that it becomes this whole big issue. And you gotta really be careful.
Oh yeah. My favorite example of this is years ago. Somebody had asked me a question. I think it was on my Discord or whatever, and I just answered very succinctly. And they asked me a yes or no. Well, they made a statement and then asked a question, and I was just like, no. And I didn't bother to explain. I didn't go any further than that. I didn't think I had to. And that was it. And I got a message from this person, essentially like, why don't you like me? What did I do? And I was like, what are you talking about? There are, especially on the internet, people will read into short answers or curtness or being abrupt. And you may not mean it intentionally, and that's great, but unfortunately, it has long-lasting repercussions. And the harder you are to work with, or the more that people think you're hard to work with, or you may be problematic, the less work you'll get. Or the less people will technically be there to back your brand. And everybody, if you are creating a product, if you're creating art, if you are writing, if you're making games, modules, whatever, it is a product. You have a brand.
Mm-hmm.
I wish there was a way to say otherwise, but it isn't true. No matter what, if you are creating something, if you would like to receive money for something that you're doing on the internet, you are a brand.
Yeah.
And
even if the only people that interact with your brand are like hiring managers,
right,
and art directors, right? Like that's still your brand.
Yes. And and it works in both directions. Me and Kate may have talked about it several times when she's been on here. Is, artists and writers also talk about the companies that we work with. And if you're a shitty company to work with and you don't pay us on time or you don't live up to the promises, we absolutely fucking tell each other.
Yep. Yep.
And so it really does, go around the industry. And again, it's not like there is some secret Discord or whatever that we're all on bashing anybody. It is literally, I'll talk to Kate and be like, are you on project such and such? Because I got to give it the code name because we're under NDA,
Right.
And
right.
she'll be like, oh no, I won't work for that company anymore. And she'll tell me why. I was like, oh, and then that'll end up being the last time I work for that company because whatever horrible thing happened with her, or I will limit my interaction with that company. Like because I have bills to pay and I can't always say no to projects. I will say yes to a project, but I won't really promote it when it comes out, or I won't hesitate to like back away from a company if I'm questioning whether I should work with them if someone else tells me that they've had a bad experience.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I think kind of the unfortunate thing is like most people I know in the industry have had a bad experience with someone or some company
Not
that
me, I'm perfect.
has. Well, of course, it's true. It's true that never in her life has Devin Rue done anything wrong. That's
right.
That's a verifiable fact. You heard it here first.
Exactly. Even though I just told a story about that.
Yeah, you can take that to the bank. Yes. But the sad reality is that like everyone that I know has had some kind of poor experience with a brand or with an individual.
Yep.
And so it is frustratingly common for something like that to happen. And so it can sometimes feel very overwhelming trying to like navigate the space and avoid all of the potential hazards. Right. And so there's absolutely a component of like we're very like wary of working with new people, right? Because we don't know who you are and we don't know who you are and what you're about. There was a scenario, recently where and no names, nothing identifying, but there was a group that had reached out to us to say like, oh, hey, could you, partner with us on this thing? And, we said, well, we can do this for you, but that's it. Cause, internal conversation was, we don't know them from Adam, right? Could be
what?
Literally anybody. You got a website that says who you are. Great. That means that you can pay $30 to host a website and write some copy and get a picture. That there's something to be said about having a proven track record and experience and work that speaks for who you are and what you're about. That opens so many doors. Like for instance, the first time that I ever did work with Demiplane was a contract job that I got because they were going to a convention and needed someone to produce a live stream for them at that convention. And they'd had someone that they'd worked with who had to back out. And so Adam, who is, my current boss at Demiplane, posted on Twitter and was like, hey, we're looking to hire someone to produce some live streams for us at an event. If anyone has any leads or, knows someone who can do this, let me know. And I, just responded, hey, like, I have experience with live event production and also with stream production. Feel free to, contact me if you're still looking for someone. I'd be happy to chat about it. And what I didn't know, but what I found out afterwards, is that 3 or 4 people that I know personally and that know Adam personally went to him and said, hey, we saw Josh replied to your tweet. He's someone that I would work with again. And that's why he reached out to me to say, hey, I want to hire you for this, one-time gig, which is what got my foot in the door, which is how I eventually got the job, because I did a really good job on that gig. And then 2 months later said, hey, I'm looking to, move into the industry full time. If you hear of anything, let me know. And he said, actually, we're looking to hire a community manager right now. Do you want to hop on a call and talk about that? And so it was fortuitous timing. But the only reason that I have a job right now is because those 3 or 4 people that were familiar with my work, we'd worked together in the past, went and vouched for me to someone who was looking to hire a freelancer, just anybody to do the job. And that word of mouth recommendation, because we also, like, we've talked about the negative here for a little while, but we tell other people, like, if we've had a bad experience, we also share great experiences, right?
Absolutely.
Like, if you work with someone and it's a great time, I recommend them to everybody I know. I recommend them to people who don't even work in the gaming industry. I recommend them to freaking cater my wedding, like whatever I need to hire somebody for, I want to hire you because you're great.
Exactly.
And so, there it goes both ways. And so I had these people who were in my corner because I had done good work in the past, and they believed in me enough to vouch for me. And that in turn has led to me have a job. And now I'm in a position where I can work with someone and have a great experience with them and vouch for them. And so, there's a plus side to that relational component too. And it's certainly like intimidating, I feel like, to get started, because we're talking about this, and if I was brand new and had never done any work in the tabletop space before, never done any work in the gaming industry before, I'd be like, well, how do I get someone to vouch for me and my work so that I can get a job in the space? And I think it's very common to, like, when you are new to the space, go, oh, I need to go and like network and make connections with, all the people that have all the influence, because they're the ones that are going to get me a job. And so you've got a lot of people who, it's their first day doing something creative in the industry, and they're on Twitter going, hey, insert big name celebrity person here, can you help me out with my project? And like, I'm not going to tell you not to shoot your shot, but there is a much more like tried and true way to do it. And it is to go and find other people who are getting started, who are, in kind of the same stage of their creative career as you are, and work together. My first tabletop streams that I did were to relatively small audiences, and my castmates and my producers were all people who we kind of figured it out ourselves, and we're doing it for the fun of it. And we figured it out, and we did it for the fun of it. And then, one person that I was working with went off and got a job at this big company. And then they had a chance to vouch for us who had worked with them. And then another person got off and got a job at this big company. And then they had a chance to vouch for us. And slowly, as we all gained experience and gained skills, and our networks expanded individually and collectively, we started to have that opportunity where we could say, oh yeah, well, actually, like, I can vouch for so-and-so now and get their foot in the door. But it takes the time and the hard work to, one, build up the body of work and the experience to point to and say, hey, like, I can do what it is you're trying to hire me to do. And then two, it is about having those relationships with people who are doing it side by side with you, as opposed to, just trying to go straight to the top and shortcut the necessary experience of building your skills and building your resume. If, throwing a hypothetical at you here, if, let's say, you had never spent all the years and years and years that you had spent, honing your craft, becoming the, experienced cartographer that you are, you had gone to one of the big companies that you've worked with in recent memory. I'm thinking of Critical Role, Dungeons and Dragons,
Right.
Magic the Gathering. There are others. But had you gone to one of those companies and pitched yourself saying, hey, I want to do work with you. I have just decided today, I woke up this morning, I'm going to draw maps. Hire me to draw your maps, and you have no proof that you can do the work that you're pitching yourself for. They're going to look at you and go, well, why would we take a chance on you if you don't have a body of work?
Right.
And so that's like really the most important part for anyone who wants to get started working in the tabletop industry is build your body of work, because once you can point to past experience and expertise and say, look what I can do, suddenly you go into that kind of position and people go, oh yeah, you're right. You can draw maps pretty good. Maybe we should hire you for that.
Right. And before I get asked this question once this airs, a really good way to get yourself, your name, your art, your creativity, whatever, out there on the internet in the tabletop space is to talk about it and the process without, you don't need to tag us. The amount of people that tag me and like, look at my map, I ignore those. I don't have time. I wish I did. It sounds great and a fantastic way to interact with people. However, it would eat up any time I would have to draw, and I kind of need to do that to work.
Yeah.
But if you, again, we are an industry of very personal stories and characters and worlds. Get on. Talk about your process. Talk about what you're making. Talk about your personal experiences with it. Talk about you and your friends playing. Just have a conversation. Stop trying to advertise, especially when you first start. Eventually, the advertising kind of comes along in it, but I can guarantee everybody in the tabletop space, because I can't really say for all gaming, but we all
every gamer ever,
right, every gamer everywhere on this that ever existed,
anybody who's ever played a game since the invention of Pong
games
to now.
Oh, that okay. I was going way back.
Oh, yeah.
Since the dawn of time.
You're right.
We want to connect. I ended up Critical Role's cartographer because Matt and I geeked out over maps before I ever made a map for him. I was making one of my maps. I was sharing the process. I made a little video of me shading individual trees because I'm just that detail oriented. And it was shared by Will Wheaton, who somehow saw it, and
Small
then
world.
Right. And he shared it, and my Twitter exploded with that. And Matt and I had already been following each other and bantering back and forth a little bit. And he was just like, that's amazing, and we started geeking out over maps and where we started. And then, when I actually made a map, I made it, as fan art. And he already saw my body of work. He already knew what I could do. So when I was like jokingly like, hey, if you ever need a cartographer, he was like, yeah, no, we campaign 2 is coming up. I was like, oh, don't you tease me.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know?
Funny you should mention that, actually. I do need a map.
Right. And that's exactly what it was. And I was like, no, don't play with my emotions this way, Matt, you know?
Yeah.
And, you know, and that's exactly how a lot of the jobs that I have worked. Even my first work with Wizards of the Coast, which technically has never seen the light of day. The first job I ever, right. And this happens a lot in the industry, so don't be surprised. Before I got to work with Critical Role, I did have a project that I worked with Wizards, and it's because one of the other artists that they work with suggested me for a project, and I said yes. Didn't feel very confident. I should have explained things. I wish I had. But thankfully enough, they still liked my work enough. They were like, yeah, no, we love it. It's just not what we were looking for. And I was like, you know, and that happens. But everything else about the work experience with me was enough that they're like, yeah, no, we'll gladly work with you again. And that made a world of difference. But I didn't have to tag Wizards of the Coast or Chris Perkins or Matt or anyone else to get my foot in the door. I just had to keep producing high quality work.
Yeah. Yeah. There's something about just having a track record that makes it so that people go, yeah, no, I like, so even for me, right, you know, I've got all kinds of projects that are in the backlog or that I'm working on slowly, you know, when I do have, you know, bandwidth over the weekends or at the end of the workday. And as I have bandwidth, right, like I have a list of artists that I would love to work with, a list of writers that I would love to work with, and I've got them just tucked away in my head. I know, I want to work with so-and-so on this project whenever I get around to it, and so-and-so on this project whenever I get around to it. And it's just part of like existing in the space is you slowly build your list of, I want to do something with this person. I want to do something with this person. I think, this idea I've got would be perfect for them. And then it's just a matter of when does it happen? When can you make it happen?
Right.
And it's an exciting space because you do like, you get to be fans of each other and fans together and then also friends. And it's pretty neat to be like,
right.
Hey, you know, like, so before you and I ever met, Devin, I had a friend who had like, you know, purchased one of the, it was campaign coins. They did your like Compass Roses.
Yes.
And this was, of course, you know, a number of years ago now. And so, you know, they had bought one of your Compass Roses and was like, oh my God, this is Devin Rose Compass Rose. And, you know, Devin is just like the greatest, amazing artist. This is my favorite possession of all time. And I was like, wow, like that's super cool. I'm glad you're so like excited and passionate about, you know, this artist you follow. You know, I, at that point, like knew of your work from Critical Role, but we had never spoken. But, you know, here we are a couple years later. We have met through mutual friends and have opportunities to, you know, get to know one another and talk. And now we're in a scenario where like I can look back and go like, I remember the first time I heard the name Devin Rue, and it was about a Compass Rose. What a time.
Right. My first time that I heard your name, you were on a show. I think with Laugh Love Lindy.
That sounds right. Sounds right. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
It was
I'm trying to go back in my memory banks. We did do, I think, like a charity stream.
I think so.
A long time ago.
Yes. And then you just kept popping up on because every once in a while I just love to like, I love to go on Twitch and just like see who's playing D&D and like pop in and just like, you know, watch for a little bit. And sometimes I interact and sometimes now I sometimes just don't because I feel like I just get a little disruptive.
Yeah. No, I do the same thing. I like to put up streams and just kind of lurk. It's nice background noise while I'm doing other stuff.
Exactly. Great while I'm drawing.
Super useful.
So I think the first one that I saw you on was a charity stream with Laugh Love Lindy, and then I don't remember the next one.
That's okay. Honestly, I'm sorry to most people who watched me on streams back in the day, because I feel like I've matured a lot and I'm a much better performer now than I was then. So
you weren't bad. I mean, I remembered you, if that helps. I mean, I don't exactly know.
Well,
if that's
you couldn't
good
remember me for the wrong reasons, though. So that's not saying anything.
This is true. Yeah. I don't think that's how I remembered you. I'm pretty sure it was because
I don't think I've ever put my foot in my mouth so badly that it's been an issue.
Right.
But
yeah.
Right. All I was getting at is, it's wild how, a couple years time makes such a big difference.
Yes.
But it is fun. It's fun. You get to be friends with people. You get to be fans together and enjoy the same things together.
Exactly.
It's great.
And I love being able to recommend artists or writers or companies or whatever to people who ask me in the industry. Yeah. And sometimes that's born out of, like, I bought a product from them, but the majority of the time it comes out of, I know somebody who works there or is the artist or whatever. Mm-hmm. And rising tide lifts all boats, and all of us truly believe that. There are so many of us that absolutely hype each other up, which is just beautiful. But you can't come into the space and force friendships or force your name to be out there without something to back it up. I mean, first of all, you can't force it. That's just not how that works. But I mean,
it's true.
You have to be able to produce and create something that we all can, like, recognize as yours. And I think that that's a huge key. And I think that a lot of times, anyone who's getting their name out there isn't so naive to believe that you're tagging them out of the kindness of your heart every 3 days, begging them to look at something. We genuinely understand that our names are out there and we're associated with, like, a bigger opportunity, but we're aware of that. And the more people who do it, I've blocked people who felt the need to tag me constantly, asking me to talk to somebody at Wizards or Critical Role or wherever I was doing a project with on their behalf. And I'm like, I don't know you. And if we were friends, you would know that's the last thing you're going to ever want to do, to get me to mention your name. So, as always, our show is sponsored by Legend Keeper, a fantastic world-building tool, whether you're a writer, a GM, DM, or even a player. You can create a world, you can add all of your notes, you can determine who gets to see them, edit them, create their own. And if you own a project, you are the only person who has to have a subscription, so you can bring your players in for free, or your readers or your patrons. You can determine who can edit, who can see, who can view secrets. And there are so many really interesting tools on Legend Keeper that allow you to link pages, maps, images, sidebars, timelines, calendars, like, you name it. There's so much about Legend Keeper that is so simple and yet incredibly effective. And I think that that's the other thing that we need to really understand when it comes to interacting with anyone with any notoriety in this space. We are asked the same questions over and over and over again. Yeah. We can have bad days. We can, in my particular case, answer people in a very succinct manner that somehow comes across as me being abrupt or curt. And I now just add an emoji at the end of everything that I write, because I'm not being angry. I tend to answer very concisely.
Yep.
And for some people, that just comes across as like, oh, I'm being very curt, and I don't mean to. I think you're asking me a question you want a succinct answer for. I'm so sorry,
Someone recently made this point in a post on social media, talking about kind of the never-ending cycle of tabletop gaming discourse on social media, because right, like we have the same sorts of conversations year after year, time after time, like is it okay not to role play at your table, or is there a right or a wrong way to play X game? And like ultimately, like whatever you think the answer to that is, we have those conversations regularly in the tabletop space, because there's someone new who hasn't had that conversation before, and they ask the question because they're genuinely curious. Mm-hmm. And there's this gigantic, massive sigh as everyone who's had this conversation a dozen times before goes, "Oh, we're doing this again." And it took someone saying, yeah, no, like that's actually like someone's first time having the conversation. And if it's a really serious conversation and you don't have bandwidth for it, just tap out. Just don't be involved. Let the people who have the bandwidth to have that conversation again, have the conversation again, and explain everything that needs to be told to this person who's genuinely, curious and looking for a legitimate answer. But we shouldn't be like shaming someone for not having had that conversation before. That's not a good way to like teach someone something new. And that was like a big, like, it sounds so silly, but that was like a big eye-opening moment for me, because I had just like never thought about it in those terms before. And suddenly I was like, oh my goodness, like you're right. We should actually, like, this is a great thing when people ask the same question again. And now I'm like really excited when I see some of that Discord come around again. Because even though I go, oh, like I can just, copy and paste my answer from when we talked about this 2 years ago. But even though like I have that moment, it's still very excited about, okay, well, let's make sure that someone else gets to learn and someone else has a great experience where they're introduced to this like nuance and conversation that we've had. Because we get to teach them something that they're excited to learn. And that's such a privilege. It really is. I'm a huge proponent of like lifelong learning. It's why I make a point of like reading nonfiction regularly. I firmly believe in like spending time to develop my skills. It's part of why I started playing chess every morning. I just wanted to like sharpen my brain, because I felt like I was getting a little stagnant up there. And so like I'm all about like continued learning, and the fact that there's someone out there who's asking a question and is legitimately excited about like having a conversation and learning something for the first time, like that should be something that fires us up. And I'm fired up about it now.
I semi am.
Hey, that's okay. That's okay. That's okay. Like the person said, if you don't have bandwidth for it, you can tap out. There's a whole bunch of us. It only takes one person to carry the torch.
Exactly. Well, I mean, even again, I'm the person who does everything for my brand and my company, and for anyone else who kind of feels the same way, sometimes if I'm the only person there is to ask, there is no one to share my bandwidth with. Yeah, it is perfectly okay, and it is a legitimate response and answer to send somebody to a post you've already made, a video you already have, an article you've already written. Like, it isn't rude. It's like, hey, I've answered this question. And again, a lot of times, because people will ask me a question like on Twitter, and I'm like, I need far more than 280 characters to answer your question. Here's an entire article I wrote on it, however long ago, and that's okay. And we should all be okay with people who give those responses, because it means that at least they're not being like, oh, fuck you,
Yeah. And they could. I mean, that's also a possibility.
Nobody owes you anything. You are not entitled to anybody's time, anybody's conversation. Like, not that I'm saying that you should like, oh my God, thank you for even acknowledging me, but you're not entitled to it. So if somebody doesn't have the bandwidth to answer, don't take it personal, but don't also demand an answer or a response, because that will get you blocked. I do have a question for you before I forget.
Okay. Hit me.
I'm sure you're perfectly okay with this. Let's talk about Demiplane.
Yeah, let's do it.
Let's what the fuck is Demiplane, and what the fuck does it do for me?
Yeah, so we here's my like elevator pitch. We make digital tools for tabletop games. So you know, I'm sure that a lot of folks who might be listening are, familiar with things like D&D Beyond, things like Roll20. The idea is let's make digital tools that make it easier to play tabletop role-playing games. Like Pathfinder, Vampire the Masquerade, the Alien RPG, Marvel Multiverse role-playing game, Avatar Legends. Our goal is to support a lot of the really exciting Candela Obscura. That's one of them. Our goal is to support a lot of these, exciting games that either haven't historically had really like high quality digital tool support, like something like D&D Beyond, or it's to help launch a new game. Like we're supporting the Daggerheart playtest from Critical Role, or the Starfinder playtest from Pathfinder that starts later this year. We're supporting them from the jump, from the playtest start, in order to make it easier to learn the rules and make characters. And that's a really helpful resource to people who are either, learning a game for the first time, or who, maybe don't have an encyclopedic memory and can't recall every rule and every stat block and everything along the way. We're here to make it easier on you, to make it so that you can look something up quickly on your computer, on your phone, on your tablet, whatever device you have with you while you're playing. It's a couple quick clicks. It's all searchable. You find it, and then you can get back to playing. Because sometimes at the table, especially, before technology and digital tools were around, it would take a long time to dig up the right thing from the right book, especially if you don't know what exactly it is you're looking for or where you're looking for it. And our goal is to kind of shortcut that process, so that way you have everything you need to play ready to go, so you can spend as much time playing as possible and as little time looking up rules, flipping through books, doing math in your head. We make that all as easy as possible so that you can just focus on having fun playing the games.
Can you add customized stuff to it?
That is coming soon. We have started kind of kicking the tires on homebrew functionality. We don't have a set timeline for when that's going to be available, because software development can be really unpredictable. It could be moving along really great, and then we hit something that we aren't quite sure how to solve, and it takes a lot longer than we expect to figure it out. We don't have like a timeline that we can share right now, but we have started kicking the tires, and we expect to begin work on that in earnest this year at the very least. I am hopeful that we'll have more than just, hey, we've started the work by the end of the year. But again, it's hard to predict.
What is your favorite feature about it?
About just Demiplane in general?
Yes.
For me, I think the nicest thing for me is I have a hard time like keeping all the characters that I've played over the years like straight in my head, right there. There's hundreds of them at this point. And especially when you're switching between different game systems, it's easy to forget, oh wait, how does this mechanic work in this game? How does that mechanic work in that game? And so the nice thing about our character tools is you can build a character. If you don't know how something works, you can just like click on it and it'll explain, give the quick rules brief. So you go, oh, yeah, that's right. That's what an initiative roll is. I forgot. Right. Let me refresh my memory very quickly. But then we've also got great like notes sections. So that way I use that to like type up like one of my notes is just like, okay, here's the key things that I need to remember about this character if I play them again in the future, right? Like, here's the key backstory details. Here's their motivations. Here's why I'm doing what I'm doing. Here's what I'm trying to accomplish with them. Things that oftentimes aren't part of like character creation or would show up anywhere on an official character sheet. I do like the bullet point backstory document right there in my character sheet in my notes field, and that way I've got it. And it's not separate. It's not like in a Word document. It's not in a journal somewhere. It's on my character sheet. I only need to have one thing in order to be ready to go.
So, of course, because it's big for me, what about accessibility?
Yeah, I would say that accessibility is one of those things that we're like constantly working on, because we're constantly going, oh, this was something that like we didn't know how to do before, and now we're working on it. We have some really phenomenal folks in our community who have given us great feedback over the years, saying, hey, my screen reader can't figure this out. It doesn't know what that button is. And then we go in and we, put a label on it. So that way, what it is. Or someone says, hey, like, when I'm trying to, navigate this part of the sheet on my keyboard, it's doing this weird thing where it's jumping around in an order that doesn't make sense to me. And I can't figure out how to get to this thing that I'm trying to get to. And we go, oh, great point. Let's fix that. And so each step of the way, we're incorporating all the things that we've learned in the past to say, hey, when we first rolled this out, we didn't have this thing and that thing that were accessible because we didn't realize what we needed to do in order to do that. But as soon as someone said, hey, that's an issue, we said, hey, great, let's fix it. And now those have all become standard practices as we build out new things and new tools. So it's only going to get better. I can't guarantee that it's 100% accessible, because not many things are 100% accessible. But each step of the way, if someone says, hey, I can't do this, or this doesn't work for me, we say, hey, thanks for letting us know. We're going to take a look at that, and we're going to make it accessible so that way you can do the thing that you're trying to do. And that's really, our commitment is we can only do the best that we can do. And we certainly don't know everything that is an issue until someone points it out. But we do commit that, as soon as we're made aware of something, we're going to start figuring out, okay, how can we fix this? And, humans, we only have so much bandwidth. We might not be able to fix it right away, but that's a priority for us. One of the great things about digital tools is it makes learning a game very accessible to someone who's new, and it makes playing with these resources. It makes it so much more accessible for people who, maybe have an issue like doing math quickly in their head, or an issue like reading long chunks of text in a rule book. We by design, digital tools are already an accessibility tool. And so we're trying to just continue to increase the amount of accessibility each step of the way, to the best of our ability.